My mom kicked me out for disrespecting the family. All because I didn't go to a cousin's engagement brunch I wasn't even invited to. What she said next nearly broke me, until I remembered the secret my grandmother left only to me. I stood in the entryway of the 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street, the one with the weird yellow shutters Dad painted in 1993 and never changed. It was September 15th, a Sunday afternoon. My hands were shaking so hard I had to put my phone on the console table. My stomach twisted into something sharp and cold, the kind of physical reaction you get when you know with absolute certainty that your world is about to fall apart. The phone call had been 20 minutes earlier, a conference call really. My mother, Denise, on speaker, and my Aunt Carol, her older sister, chiming in from her massive estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. "Kayla," my mother started, her voice flat and formal, the tone she uses when she's preparing to perform an execution. "Aunt Carol and I have discussed this. Your behavior this weekend was simply unacceptable." "Unacceptable?" I whispered. I had spent the weekend applying for jobs after losing my position in July. Losing my job meant losing my downtown apartment, losing my car payment eligibility, and worse, losing the last shred of independence I'd earned. At 27, I was back in my childhood bedroom feeling like a failure. "Mom, I wasn't invited to Jessica's brunch. I didn't even know the address until I saw Aunt Carol's Instagram story an hour ago. Jessica, my cousin, was marrying some guy who worked in finance. This was the engagement brunch for the closest family, which apparently didn't include the jobless relative sleeping on a twin bed in the guest wing. That," Aunt Carol's voice crackled, cutting in with that fake, sweet authority of someone who truly believes their own lies, "is precisely the point, sweetie. Jessica is trying to build a new life, a respectable life. And you, with your situation, you reflect poorly on all of us. You just need to do better, Kayla. Show up. Be presentable." I looked down at my outfit. Dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, clean. I wasn't disheveled, I was broke. There was a difference. But in their world those two things were the same. "I don't have a car, Aunt Carol," I stated, trying to hold on to logic. "I've been taking the bus to interviews." The brunch was 45 minutes away in Southwood. How was I supposed to get there? My mother let out a sharp, dismissive sound. Not a laugh, just a puff of air that communicated absolute contempt. "Excuses, excuses. You are the only person who doesn't prioritize family. You're being willfully ungrateful, Kayla. Ungrateful for the roof over your head. Ungrateful for the family that provides for you." "Provides for me? Mom, I'm eating through the last $800 I earned before I was laid off. I pay for my own food. I was just asking for a place to regroup for 3 months. The truth was, I wasn't just jobless. I was in deep water. My emergency fund was gone, depleted by the sudden move and COBRA payments. I had exactly $743.12 left in my bank account. The car I had been driving was a leased SUV that I had to return immediately after losing my income, meaning I had no personal transport whatsoever. I was trapped. "This is exactly what I mean by disrespecting the family," Mom said, her voice rising to a dangerous pitch. "You refuse to participate, you wallow in self-pity, and you talk back to your elders. Ends now. We cannot have this toxicity here. It reflects poorly on our standing in the community." "Denise is right, Kayla," Aunt Carol chimed in, making the betrayal complete. "You need to understand that this house isn't a charity. It's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet. My chest tightened. That phrase. Stand on your own 2 feet. When you have nowhere to stand. I didn't have a safety net, never had. The net was them and they were burning it. "I need you out of the house by 7 p.m. tonight," Mom concluded, a cold finality settling in. "I've already called your father and he said he can't take you right now, he's dealing with his own things. Find a hotel. Or a friend." I hung up. I didn't have the words to scream or beg. All I could see was the reflection of my defeated, furious face in the polished console table. 2 suitcases were all I owned that mattered. I had nowhere else to go. This was the family whose name I was protecting? I walked back into my room and started throwing clothes into a duffel bag, my brain racing, trying to figure out where I could go that was safe and wouldn't be a burden. I remembered my best friend Sarah lived in a tiny studio, but she would let me crash. I texted her, my fingers still trembling. "Emergency. Need a floor/couch tonight." As I pulled my last heavy box out from under the bed, a box filled with childhood drawings, letters, and mementos, I saw it. It wasn't a box I packed. It was a sturdy, thick cardboard file box, sealed with 2 strips of black electrical tape, labeled simply, "Cake. Open after." It had been sitting there since my grandmother, Margaret, passed away almost 8 years ago. My grandma, the only person who ever truly saw me and not my potential for disrespect, had left instructions with the executor that this box was to be delivered to me personally and sealed until the time is right. I had never opened it. I had been afraid it was too sad, too final. Now, standing in the rubble of my life with 90 minutes until I was homeless, I didn't have time for fear. I tore the tape off. Inside, nestled beneath a crocheted shawl she'd made me, was a thick brown legal envelope, its flaps still damp sealed. The only thing written on it was, "Kayla. Do not break the seal until you need to." The weight of it in my hands felt like more than just paper. Felt like a lifeline thrown from 8 years in the past. I zipped up the duffel bag, the sound loud in the silent house. My mom was in the living room, strategically positioned on the sofa, scrolling through her iPad. She didn't look up. She was performing the role of the martyred mother, too busy to acknowledge the child she was discarding. I walked past her with the 2 suitcases. "I want to talk about this for 1 minute," I said, planting my feet. Her eyes remained glued to the screen. "There is nothing to discuss, Kayla. The decision has been made." Aunt Carol agrees. "The entire family is concerned about your lack of ambition and your attitude." "My lack of ambition? I worked 60 hours a week for 4 years to pay off my student loans. I just got laid off, Mom. I lost my job, not my drive." "And what exactly is the attitude you're talking about?" Asking why I was being chastised for not attending an event I wasn't invited to. She finally put the iPad down, slowly, deliberately. She didn't look angry, she looked bored, which was somehow worse. "You are ungrateful. That is the attitude. You see this house as a free ride and you see us as ATMs. You never contribute anything positive to the family narrative. You're a placeholder, Kayla. Until you can be successful, stay out of our way." A placeholder. The word lodged in my throat like a shard of glass. It wasn't about the brunch. It was about her social image. I was a loose end, a thread she didn't want hanging in public. "I hope you're happy," I said, my voice dangerously low. She picked the iPad back up. "I will be happy when you learn to respect this family and respect the opportunities we've given you. Now please, the keys are on the hook. Leave them on the table when you go." It wasn't a failure to confront her. It was a realization that confronting a brick wall of self-absorption was pointless. She was incapable of hearing me. I walked out of the house on Maple Street, leaving the keys on the polished wood, and pulled my 2 bags onto the sidewalk. Sarah's studio was too small for 2 people for long, but it was safe. It was about 45 minutes away by bus and subway, a journey I now had to make with all my belongings. When I finally arrived at Sarah's, it was nearly 10 p.m. Sarah, bless her, didn't ask questions, just microwaved some pizza and handed me a spare blanket. I ended up sleeping on her 2-seater futon, which was about 3 feet too short for my frame. That night was rock bottom. I lay there in the dark, my legs dangling off the end, listening to the sirens outside, feeling the full, crushing weight of having no options. I had no job, no savings, no car, and now no home. I was a 27-year-old adult, utterly dependent on a friend's generosity, because my own mother decided my presence was bad branding. The rage was a slow, burning thing, but it was mixed with a deep, sickening sense of defeat. How could I fight back? They had everything. My mother had the house, a good salary from her admin job, and the endless financial backing and social clout of Aunt Carol, who was always ready to deploy a 5-figure lawyer against anyone who threatened the family name. I had $743 and a futon that smelled faintly of pizza. I reached for the brown legal envelope which I'd brought with me. It felt solid, heavy with possibility. I sat up, pulled out Sarah's mini scissors and carefully cut the seal. Inside were 3 documents. A typed, notarized letter from my grandmother, Margaret. A photocopy of a special warranty deed, dated June 2017. A receipt from a law firm, Franklin & Sons, PA, for estate planning consultation. I unfolded the letter first. Grandma Margaret's familiar handwriting was faded but steady. "Kayla, my sweet girl. If you are reading this, it means you have faced a storm and you need a reminder of your own strength. And perhaps a bit of protection. Your mother and your Aunt Carol have a long history of mistaking wealth and status for intelligence. I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of their endless social climb. The home on Maple Street, the one with those ridiculous yellow shutters, is legally yours. I transferred the title to you in 2017, using a specific tax planning vehicle. It took the combined efforts of 2 lawyers and 1 very expensive accountant. Your mother knows I did something with the estate for tax reasons, but she has always assumed the house was held in a family trust where she was the manager, or that it was simply protected from being taxed twice. She never read the fine print. She only cares about the appearance of ownership. The deed is attached. It is valid. It is filed in the county registry. Do not let them gaslight you. Do not let them take this from you. It is your home, my darling. It was always meant to be your safe harbor. Use the names in the receipt. They are trustworthy. Now go get what's yours. Love, Grandma. I stared at the name on the photocopy of the warranty deed. Kayla Eliza Rojas, grantee. The grantor was Margaret Elizabeth Rojas. The date, June 14, 2017. The house my mother had just kicked me out of, the house she called her house, the house Aunt Carol said wasn't a charity. It was legally, unequivocally mine. My mind didn't rush to justice or revenge immediately. It flashed back to the day Grandma Margaret gave me the sealed box. It was a Tuesday. I had just gotten my first real job offer. She hugged me tight and said, "Hold this close and don't let anyone tell you who you are." It wasn't just luck. It was a deeply intelligent, calculated move by a woman who saw the future and chose to protect the vulnerable person in her family over the image-obsessed ones. Grandma Margaret had earned that house over 40 years of teaching. She was a master of strategy even in death. I spent the next morning, I think it was a Tuesday, at the city library. Sarah left for work at 7 a.m. and I sat on her floor with the laptop, the documents spread out, feeling the reality of the situation sink in. This wasn't just a piece of paper. This was leverage. It was power. My first thought was, she'll find a loophole. Aunt Carol's lawyer will tear this apart. This was the I have no options moment, even with a literal deed in my hand. Years of being diminished and told I was inadequate had left a deep impression. My mother and aunt specialized in making me believe I couldn't win, that I was inherently powerless. I thought about just going back, waiving the deed and demanding to be let in. But that wouldn't be enough. My mother would rage, deny it, call the police, and twist the narrative into, ungrateful daughter tries to steal the family home from her elderly mother. She'd use the fact that I hadn't lived there consistently for years against me. I needed an expert. I pulled up the name on the law firm receipt, Franklin and Sons, PA. The date on the receipt was from 2017, the same day as the deed. I typed the name into Google. They were a small but reputable firm specializing in estate and real property law, located in the next county over. I called them at 9:02 a.m. I got a paralegal named Maria. When I gave her my name and mentioned Margaret Rojas, she paused. "Yes, Ms. Rojas. We have a very comprehensive file on you. Your grandmother left very specific instructions that we were to take your call immediately, should you ever need us." My grandmother, even 8 years gone, was still running interference. I booked a consultation for the following afternoon, Wednesday at 2 p.m. I had to take 2 buses to get there, but I had the documents. That was all that mattered. As I waited, I kept an eye on my mother's social media. She had posted a picture of the living room, strategically angled to show the nice new throw pillows she'd bought. The caption read, "Peace and serenity after a necessary cleansing. So grateful for the supportive people in my life. #family first, #no toxicity." She truly believed her own narrative. She thought she had won. A text from Aunt Carol arrived that night out of the blue. I hadn't replied to her since the conference call. "Aunt Carol, 9:41 p.m. Sweetie, I really do feel bad for you, but this is tough love. Your mother says you left a huge mess in your room. Don't burn bridges. We're family. Just apologize and admit you were out of line. Then maybe in a month or 2 we can discuss you crashing on the couch for a short time." The audacity. Don't burn bridges? She was telling me I was homeless because I didn't show up for a party, and now she was offering me a couch in the house I legally owned. I wrote a reply in my head. "You are offering me a couch in the house I own. Get ready for the apology to come from a judge." But I didn't send it. I was getting cold and clinical. I needed to document, not debate. I took a screenshot of the text. Evidence of her knowing my desperate situation and using it to leverage an apology. The next day I arrived at Franklin and Sons, PA. The office had those genuinely terrible inspirational posters on the walls. The kind that say, "Justice," over a faded picture of the Lincoln Memorial. I sat there in the waiting room trying not to laugh at the sheer cheesiness of it, thinking this guy definitely loses a lot of cases. Turns out he didn't. Mr. Franklin Jr., a man in his late 50s with a kind, serious face, invited me into his office. He had my file ready. "Kayla," he began, setting the file on the desk. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman and extremely forward-thinking. This arrangement was, in a word, genius." He explained the backstory. Back in 2017, Grandma Margaret was worried about two things: the rising cost of property taxes and the inevitable infighting between her daughters, Denise, my mother, and Carol. She knew Denise and Carol would fight over the estate when she was gone, and she knew they'd try to sell the house immediately, which was the only thing holding the family together in the city. She wanted a legal guarantee that the house would stay a home, not a commodity, Mr. Franklin explained. "So, we used a very specific and now rarely used tax provision. By transferring the house to you, her granddaughter, and listing the consideration as a gift under a certain tax code, we shielded it from a massive capital gains tax she would have incurred if she sold it, and we kept it out of the main estate entirely." He tapped the deed photocopy. "She did not make your mother or your aunt trustees. She made you the outright owner. Fee simple. The house is and has been for 8 years 100% in your name." "Why didn't my mother know?" I asked, my voice still hesitant. "She did. She just chose to ignore the details. When your grandmother signed the papers, your mother and aunt were present to discuss the tax implications of the estate. Your grandmother said, 'I'm using this transfer to secure the tax status of the main asset.' Your mother heard 'secured tax status' and assumed she was still the primary heir in practice. She signed off on the document saying she had been informed of the transfer, but she never bothered to read who the grantee was. She only cares about what she can tell her friends at the country club. The idea that you, the less ambitious one, would hold the actual title was simply beyond her comprehension. The antagonist explicitly underestimates protagonist." The phrase echoed in my head. My mother assumed only someone with her status could possibly be the recipient of a multi-$100,000 asset. "So what's the plan?" I asked, suddenly feeling the adrenaline replacing the anxiety. Mr. Franklin smiled. "The plan, Kayla, is simple. You are the landlord and your mother is a tenant at sufferance. She is squatting in your house. We need to serve notice of termination of tenancy and file a suit for quiet title to legally affirm your ownership in court, just in case they decide to try and fabricate a document." He looked at me, his eyes sharp. "But this isn't about winning legally. We've already won. This is about winning decisively. We need to make the confrontation public, calculated, and undeniable. You need to show them you are not the placeholder they think you are." "Here is what we need to avoid," Mr. Franklin said, leaning forward and resting his hands on the mahogany desk. "We need to avoid them selling off your grandmother's valuable possessions like her antique jewelry or the silver service, claiming they needed to liquidate assets while you're locked out. And we need to avoid the PR war. Your mother and aunt are good at making noise." My first immediate win, my first taste of power, was Mr. Franklin agreeing to work on retainer, paid for by a small trust fund Grandma Margaret had set up solely for the purpose of protecting the house, another contingency she'd planned. "The cost of the filing fee for the notice of termination is $225, he stated. "I can draft the official notice of ownership today, citing the 2017 recorded deed and demanding immediate possession. But you are the one who has to serve it." "I'll serve it," I said instantly. My heart was pounding but my voice was steady. Over the next few days the work began. This was not the glamorous revenge you see in movies. It was tedious, detail-oriented strategic preparation. Strategy Session 1. Documentation and Control. Objective: establish proof of my mother's actions and my lack of resources. Action 1. Proof of tenancy. Mr. Franklin drafted the notice of ownership and demand for possession. The notice stated clearly, "You are currently occupying the premises at 123 Maple Street, a property legally owned by Kayla E. Rojas, recorded deed, Book 450, page 1122, and you are hereby served with a 72-hour notice of termination of tenancy at sufferance." The specificity of the book and page number was crucial. Action 2. The disrespect. I compiled screenshots of every relevant text. Aunt Carol's offer of a couch, my mother's no toxicity Instagram post, and the one that hurt the most, a text from my mom 3 weeks ago. Just use the back door, Kayla. I don't want people seeing the Honda that looks like a hand-me-down in the driveway when Mrs. Henderson comes over. Mrs. Henderson was a social rival. This documented her motive. Image, not safety. Action 3. The financials. I got printouts from my bank. My $743.12 balance, the dates of my job loss, and the proof I had no car, the lease termination agreement. I needed to show the court and anyone watching that they hadn't just been strict, they had put me on the street. I was drafting the final summary for Mr. Franklin when my cat, Barnaby, who Sarah had been temporarily fostering for me, decided my temporary desk was a jungle gym. He knocked over Sarah's coffee cup. All over my keyboard. I sat there watching the lukewarm liquid drip down through the keys, thinking even my cat is trying to stop me. It was a small, ridiculous, utterly frustrating moment that was completely separate from the giant legal battle. I calmly bought a new keyboard at a pharmacy down the street, came back, dried everything off, and finished the summary. I sent the email anyway. That Thursday morning I got a text from my mother. Mom, 10:15 a.m. Did you take the Waterford crystal vase from the china cabinet? If you did, you need to return it immediately. It's part of the estate. I'll call the police if you don't. She was starting to liquidate. This was the moment Mr. Franklin warned me about. She was trying to frame me as a thief to justify the eviction. I replied with a single calm text. I did not take the vase. I suggest you photograph all assets and log them with a notary before you move anything else. It was a cold, clinical response that completely threw her off. She didn't reply. She expected a panicked denial, not legal advice. 2 days after the vase text, I was at the county recorder's office. This was another small, tactical victory. The original deed was filed there, public record. I requested certified copies, 3 of them just in case. I felt a weird mix of fear and triumph walking out of that drab government building with the official seal on the pages. The paperwork was real. The power was real. On Saturday, I received a series of frantic, blurry photos from my father, who was traveling for work and had no idea about the true nature of my eviction, only the attitude story. He was texting me because he was worried. Dad, 1:34 p.m. Heard from your mom you were being difficult. She sent me a picture of the new deadbolt she had installed on the side door this morning. And I saw they changed the garage code. She said it was for security, while she's alone. Are you sure you shouldn't just apologize, kid? My mother had changed the locks, physically barring me from entering the property I owned. This was trespass and unlawful exclusion under our state's property laws. It was illegal. And she had done it publicly, announcing it to my father. I called Mr. Franklin immediately. She changed the locks. That's a serious escalation. Excellent, he said, not sounding happy but satisfied. This plays directly into our hands. We now have irrefutable evidence of her actively denying the legal property owner access to the premises. This shows malicious intent and removes any defense of misunderstanding. I will amend the suit to include a claim for damages related to unlawful exclusion. He sent me the amended documents. I spent that afternoon printing them at a local Kinko's. The final bundle included the notice of ownership, the certified deed copy, the complaint for quiet title and ejectment, and the supporting documentation showing her text messages and the photo of the new lock. We set the service date for the following Tuesday, October 1st at 10 a.m. Mr. Franklin insisted we had to use a professional process server, not just for the legal standing but for the witness testimony. The whole point was to make the confrontation public and undeniable. We need to avoid having this turn into a shouting match where she can claim emotional distress, Mr. Franklin advised during our final strategy call. This needs to be clinical, like serving papers at a large corporation. The process server, Mr. Denton, will handle the delivery. You need to be there for 2 reasons. 1, to physically assert your ownership, and 2, to ensure she sees your face and knows this is not an impersonal legal threat from a law firm, it's you. What if she refuses the papers? I asked. It doesn't matter. Once the server is within a reasonable distance and announces the purpose, the service is complete. Mr. Denton is former law enforcement. He won't be intimidated. But here's where we get smart. We're not going to serve just her. We are going to serve Aunt Carol as well. We know she's involved and she has deep pockets. The threat of involving her in a civil suit, especially one where the deed is undeniable, will panic her and pull her resources away from supporting your mother. I love the idea of pulling Aunt Carol into the crossfire. She was the real architect of the disrespecting the family narrative. On Monday, the day before the confrontation, I had a brief moment of overwhelming doubt. I was sitting at a coffee shop near Sarah's work, trying to review the 40 pages of legal documents. I looked at the names: Denise Rojas, Carol Peterson. These were the women who controlled my life narrative for 27 years. They had the wealth, the status, and the ingrained belief that they were untouchable. What if Mr. Franklin was wrong? What if a judge did find some obscure clause about continuous residency and ownership? I called Mr. Franklin, my voice tight. What if they fight this for years? I don't have the money for a long battle. Kayla, he said, his voice reassuringly calm. I've done this for 30 years. Your grandmother's planning was meticulous. There is no counterargument. Quiet title actions are straightforward when the deed is clear. What we are doing tomorrow is not the start of the fight. It is the end of the intimidation. They thrive on ambiguity. We are providing clarity. He continued, the key detail is this. Tax law is a different field than property law. They used their estate attorney who missed the property registration entirely, assuming the paperwork was only about the tax exemption. That's where they failed. They relied on their own status to make assumptions. His words steadied me. They were arrogant. And arrogance is a tactical weakness. That night, Aunt Carol sent me another text, this one more aggressive. Aunt Carol, 8:11 p.m. Denise said you were being weird about the vase. If you have done anything to jeopardize your mother's rightful property, I will ensure my personal attorney, Mr. Davies, hits you with a restraining order and a lawsuit for defamation. Don't make this worse for yourself. I showed the text to Sarah. She was furious. She's trying to intimidate you into admitting guilt over something you didn't do in a house you own. Kayla, you have to hit back. I screenshotted the text and added it to the evidence file. Antagonist escalation 2. Threat of legal retaliation. Perfect. I slept poorly, waking up at 5 a.m. on Tuesday, October 1st. I put on my most professional-looking interview outfit, a black blazer and a simple silk top, the uniform of a woman who was employed, centered, and fully capable. I wasn't just wearing clothes, I was wearing credibility. I met Mr. Franklin and Mr. Denton, the process server, at a Starbucks 5 blocks from Maple Street. Mr. Denton was a large, quiet man with a clipboard and an air of professional neutrality. Mr. Franklin handed me an envelope. This is your final piece of evidence, Kayla. Your grandmother included a personal letter of instruction to the current occupants of the house. I want you to hand it to your mother only after she has read the notice of ownership. I took the envelope. It was sealed with wax, and on the wax was Grandma Margaret's signet ring impression. The tiny detail that matters. At 9:55 a.m., we parked 2 cars down from the 3-bedroom ranch on Maple Street. I could see the yellow shutters from here. My heart was thumping so hard I thought it might punch through my blazer. Remember the plan, Mr. Franklin whispered. Mr. Denton serves the papers. You state clearly and calmly, this is the notice of termination of tenancy for my property. You have 72 hours to vacate. Do not argue. Do not take the bait. Let the papers do the talking. We walked up the path. The house looked exactly as it had when I left, but now the familiarity felt like a hostile facade. Mr. Denton knocked firmly on the door. My mother, Denise, opened the door. She was wearing a perfectly tailored denim dress and her pearl necklace, looking ready for a social event. She took one look at me, in my blazer, flanked by 2 serious-looking men, and her fake sweet smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, icy confusion. Kayla, what is this? She demanded, looking past me at Mr. Franklin. Is this about the vase? Because I told you I'm calling the police. Mr. Denton stepped forward, holding out 2 manila envelopes. He spoke in a clipped, formal monotone. Denise Rojas, you are hereby served with a notice of ownership and demand for possession and a complaint for quiet title and ejectment. And Carol Peterson, you are hereby served with a notice of pending litigation. I am Mr. Denton, a registered process server. He placed the envelopes directly in her hand. My mother didn't drop them. She stood there frozen, staring at the envelopes, then back at me. What is this nonsense? Quiet title. This is my house. What kind of scam are you running, Kayla? This was my moment. I took a deep breath and the cold, clinical professionalism I'd practiced for a week snapped into place. Mom, that's where you're wrong, I said. I used her name, not Mom. This is the notice of termination of tenancy for my property. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, or the sheriff will carry out the ejectment. Your property? She laughed, a high, harsh sound that was meant to be dismissive but came out panicked. Don't be ridiculous. This is the family home. It's in Grandma's trust and I'm the manager. You have absolutely no claim. You are simply squatting on your friend's couch trying to extort me. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across my son's face. Mark sat across the aisle in his navy suit, looking confident. Too confident. His wife Tara whispered something that made him smirk. Judge Patel adjusted his glasses and looked directly at me. Mrs. Brooks, do you understand what your son is requesting? My fingers tightened around my cane. He's asking you to declare me incompetent so he can keep my house. A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Mark's jaw twitched, but his expression stayed calm. He'd always been good at hiding things. We'll examine the evidence regarding the property transfer and your mental capacity, the judge said, tapping the thick folder before him. Mark shot me a pitying look, like he'd already won. Like I was just a confused old woman who didn't understand what was happening. He had no idea what I'd brought in the canvas bag at my feet. 30 years in human resources had taught me one thing. Documentation wins wars. The judge cleared his throat. Let's begin. My heart pounded, but not from fear. From anger. From the determination of a woman who'd spent 3 decades fighting workplace battles, and wasn't about to lose her home without a fight. 10 years ago, I would have laughed if you told me I'd end up fighting my only child in court. Back then I was still working at Henderson Manufacturing, mediating disputes and helping employees navigate complicated situations. I retired at 68 when my arthritis made typing painful. My husband had been gone for 5 years, but our house still felt full of him. His coffee mug sat in the cabinet. His tools hung in the garage. The maple tree we'd planted when Mark was born stood tall in the front yard. When Mark called saying he'd lost his job, I didn't hesitate. Come stay with me, I said. Just until you get back on your feet. He and Tara arrived with their 2 kids, boxes stacked high in my living room. For the first few weeks, it felt nice having family around again. The house echoed with laughter and noise. Thanks, Mom, Mark said, hugging me tight. We'll be out of your hair soon. I smiled, believing him. Take your time. This is what family does. I had no idea that opening my door meant I'd eventually be fighting to keep it. Looking back now, I see the warning signs I missed. But hindsight is always clearer than hope. The changes started slowly. So slowly I almost didn't notice. Mark converted my dining room into his home office. He took down the wedding photo of me and his father to hang a whiteboard covered in sales targets. My husband's favorite chair disappeared, replaced by an expensive ergonomic thing Mark said helped his back. The full consequence began immediately. My mother tried to fight, hiring a local real estate attorney, but the process was swift. Within 72 hours of the notice being served, a judge issued a temporary order affirming my ownership and ordering immediate compliance with the notice of ejectment. The court date was just a formality. I thought the hearing would be like TV. Dramatic music. Gasps. It was a Tuesday at 2 p.m. in a small beige room in the municipal court building, a room where the judge ate a sandwich between cases. My mother sat across the aisle, tense and furious, with her cheap local attorney. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Thompson, didn't spend long on the details. He didn't need to. She held up the certified deed copy. "Counselor," she said to my mother's lawyer, "do you dispute the validity of this deed, filed with the county in 2017? Your Honor, we dispute the intent. The intent was for tax protection, and the true beneficiary was meant to be the current occupant, my client." Judge Thompson sighed, taking a bite of her turkey sandwich. Intent is irrelevant when the grantee is clearly named on a lawfully executed and recorded deed. Ms. Rojas is the legal owner. The only thing we have established here is that your client, Ms. Denise Rojas, has actively and knowingly denied the property owner access to her own home, even going so far as to change the locks, which constitutes unlawful exclusion and trespass. She looked at my mother, who was sitting rigid, her face scarlet. Ms. Rojas, you are ordered to vacate the premises within 24 hours. The court further grants a judgment of $5,000 in damages to the plaintiff, Ms. Kayla Rojas, to cover legal fees and temporary lodging caused by the unlawful exclusion. When she ruled in my favor, that boring beige room felt like the Supreme Court. That was the moment I realized the years of being dismissed were over. My smart strategy had paid off. The next morning, Wednesday, the sheriff's deputy accompanied me to the house to execute the final order. My mother was waiting on the porch, 2 large black suitcases beside her. She didn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead. "I hope you're happy, Kayla," she finally said, her voice heavy with self-pity, trying one last time to make me feel guilty. "You just threw your family onto the street. You won, but you lost everything." "I didn't throw you anywhere, Mom," I replied calmly. "I enforced the legal ownership of my property, which Grandma Margaret left me for my protection. You chose to make me homeless over a brunch I wasn't invited to. You made the first move. Now you're dealing with the consequences." The sheriff's deputy waited patiently. She had to take the bags and walk to the curb where a taxi waited. My mother never looked back. The door closed and the deputy handed me a key, the key to the new deadbolt she'd installed. The immediate, tangible results were overwhelming. The house was mine. The quiet was mine. I didn't have to pay a mortgage or rent, thanks to Grandma Margaret's foresight. The $5,000 judgment covered Mr. Franklin's retainer and the purchase of a decent used car, a reliable Ford Focus. I had the safe harbor Grandma promised. The systematic fallout for my mother and Aunt Carol continued. Aunt Carol, terrified of being dragged into a lawsuit, publicly cut ties with my mother, claiming she had been misled about the facts of the estate. The whole family, already gossipy, turned their backs on my mother's transparent attempt to evict me from my own house. Her status, her most prized possession, was destroyed. She had to move into a tiny, overpriced apartment in a bad neighborhood, her serenity shattered by the reality of having to pay market-rate rent. The unexpected support appeared almost immediately. My father, who had believed the attitude story, called me. "Kayla, I am so sorry. Mr. Franklin sent me copies of the full court documents. I had no idea. Your mother lied to me. I had no idea Margaret had done that." He was genuinely remorseful. He helped me hire a contractor to repaint those ridiculous yellow shutters a respectable, quiet blue. Sarah, my amazing friend, became my first house guest and my first housemate. She moved out of her tiny studio and in with me, and we split the utility bills. "You are the most strategic person I know," she told me one evening as we watched the sunset from the porch, a porch I hadn't realized was mine until a week ago. I also received a quiet note from my cousin Jessica, whose engagement brunch started this whole mess. "I found out you weren't invited. I'm sorry. I hope you can understand I had no control over the list. I want to tell you, thank you for standing up to them. I might need a lawyer one day." It was hard. It was agonizing. There were nights I cried out of sheer panic, thinking I'd lose the battle and burn the one fragile connection I had left. But every time I felt weak, I looked at that certified deed, Book 450, page 1122, and remembered I was fighting for the life and the protection my grandmother, a brilliant strategist, had arranged for me. It wasn't just revenge. It was an act of reclamation. I landed a new job 6 weeks later, working remotely as an analyst. A better job with better pay. I set up my desk in the sunny front room, the one my mother used to keep shut off for show. This victory was not hollow. It was not petty. It was a clear, clean boundary set against years of emotional abuse and financial manipulation. I didn't lose my family. I shed the toxicity that pretended to be one. The house is quiet now. It is a true safe harbor. My safe harbor. I stand strong in a place I earned, not by luck, but by the intelligence of the woman who came before me, and the intelligence I found within myself to execute her final, perfect plan. I won my house and I got my life back. And now I finally have the peace and serenity my mother only pretended to have.